So, when we decided to tackle Pakistan's commercial real estate market for this deep dive, I don't think either of us was quite ready for how strongly this article comes out swinging.
Yeah.
Officially finished.
Yeah.
You don't see that every day, especially about an entire industry.
No, you're right. It definitely grabs your attention. And the thing is, it's not just trying to be shocking, you know? The article actually lays out this really, really detailed argument for why it thinks the situation is so dire. It calls it a perfect storm of different factors, some from inside Pakistan and others, well, they're more like global trends that are affecting everyone.
Right, like a whole bunch of things hitting at once. Okay, so let's break down this perfect storm a bit. What are some of the internal factors that are contributing to this potential collapse? I mean, that's a strong word, collapse.
Yeah, no, it's intense. The article spends a lot of time talking about government policies, and not in a good way. It calls them development hostile, which is pretty harsh.
What kind of policies are we talking about specifically?
Well, it mentions a few different things, like there are these restrictions on some construction materials, which obviously impacts building. And then on top of that, they've slapped on these new taxes on the real estate sector. Oh, and the process of acquiring land. Apparently that's super opaque, which scares off investors because they don't know what's going on.
So basically, the article is saying that these policies are creating this environment where nobody wants to invest because it's too risky or the rules are constantly changing.
Exactly. And what's worse, the article is worried that the upcoming budget might actually make things worse.
How so?
Well, it seems like the government's trying to fix other problems in the economy, and to do that, they might introduce even more measures that would stifle the real estate sector, like increasing taxes on property transactions or making it way harder for people to get loans.
Ugh. So it's like this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, but even with all of that going on inside Pakistan,
Hmm.
other countries are dealing with similar issues in commercial real estate, right?
Hmm.
I mean, look at the rise of remote work and what that's doing to office spaces.
You're absolutely right. The shift to working from home, it's a global phenomenon that's definitely affecting demand for traditional offices everywhere, not just Pakistan. But here's the thing. Remember all those internal factors we talked about, the policies, the taxes? Well, those are making it even harder for Pakistan to deal with these global changes. They're already on shaky ground, and now this global shift is hitting them even harder.
Right, because their economy isn't exactly in the best shape to weather these kinds of storms, is it? And didn't the article say something about the central bank really struggling with inflation?
Oh, yeah, big time. To try and get inflation under control, the central bank has had to raise interest rates. A lot.
And that's bad because,
Well, think about it. When interest rates are high, borrowing money gets way more expensive. For developers who need loans for big projects, it's a nightmare. And regular people who want mortgages, forget about it, suddenly they can't afford it. So demand just keeps going down.
it all feels very interconnected, doesn't it? One thing impacting another and then another. And this is all without getting into that whole thing the article talked about, the informal property market, which I'll admit I'd never even heard of before.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's like this whole other system where property is bought and sold outside the normal banks and legal stuff. It's huge in Pakistan, but it's all based on trust and who you know.
Okay, so how does that play into all of this?
Well, because it's so informal, it's really hard to track where the money's going or to get that money invested in the formal economy. It's like two separate systems that don't talk to each other very well.
So even if there are people with money in Pakistan who could support the real estate market, getting them to invest in big formal projects is, like, impossible.
Pretty much. And that's a key point the article makes. If Pakistan wants to see a turnaround in its real estate market, especially commercial real estate, it needs to find a way to bridge this gap between these informal and formal systems. And, of course, address all those government policies making things worse.
So just to be clear, we're not just talking about a little dip in the market here, are we? This article is painting a picture of a much deeper problem.
Yeah, this isn't just about whether prices go up or down next month. It's about Pakistan's real estate sector facing some serious fundamental issues. And until those are dealt with, things are going to be very shaky. It's easy to get lost in the big picture stuff, but you're right, that 25% drop, that's real people feeling the pain. Their investments are literally shrinking. And the article doesn't sugarcoat it. It says, even if Pakistan's economy starts growing like gangbusters, the real estate sector might lag behind.
Oh, wow. So even if the rest of the economy picks up, real estate might stay stuck.
That's what they're saying. It's not just the usual ups and downs, you know? The problems run deeper than that. Think back to that informal market and those government policies we talked about. Those are long-term issues that take time to fix.
And doesn't the article warn about a possible huge economic crisis on the horizon? Is that tied to all of this?
Yeah, they definitely connect the dots there. Now, they don't go into detail about what this crisis might look like, but they're basically saying that this real estate mess could be a sign of bigger problems brewing in the economy.
That's unsettling, to say the least. And this instability, it's not just limited to real estate, is it? I mean, the article talks about how this could trigger a banking crisis, which is a whole other can of worms. How does a real estate slump turn into something that big?
It's all about the domino effect. See, the article talks about regional investors, and this isn't Wall Street types, okay? We're talking everyday people, doctors, judges, business owners. They've always seen property as a safe investment, a way to build wealth.
I'm starting to see where you're going with this. These aren't just people with stocks that went down. This is their main assets tied up in property. And if that property value tanks,
You got it. And because they often operate outside the traditional banking system, it's even riskier. So now you've got credit tightening because of inflation, property values plummeting. It's a recipe for disaster for these investors.
their property's worth less, and it's harder to use it to get loans or weather the storm.
Exactly. And when the article throws out a number like a 50% drop in land and plot prices, I mean, that's massive. This is real wealth evaporating for a lot of people.
And it's not just happening within Pakistan's borders either, right? What about the overseas Pakistanis who invest back home?
Huge point. They've always been a vital part of the economy, sending money back, investing in real estate. But now, with all this uncertainty, property values tanking, they're understandably hesitant to put more money in.
So it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The less confidence there is, the worse the market gets. It's this downward spiral.
You nailed it. And that's where the article gets really interesting because it goes from this big picture view and zooms in on one specific city to show how this is all playing out in the real world. Multan.
Right, like a case study to illustrate what's happening. So what's going on in Multan? Why focus on that city in particular?
Well, Multan's been a hotbed for real estate, especially those DHA projects, the Defense Housing Authority. They're marketed as these exclusive communities, high growth potential, so they attracted a ton of investment from inside Pakistan and overseas.
But now those investments aren't looking so hot, are they?
Not even close. The article quotes a guy named Kamal Abbas. He's the CEO of Hussein Associates, and he says property values in Multan's DHA projects have fallen a whopping 41% in just 2 years.
2 years. That's incredibly fast.
Tell me about it. He says that works out to an average loss of about 6 million rupees per plot.
Ouch, that's gotta hurt.
And it all circles back to the article's main point. This isn't just a bump in the road. This is a full-blown crisis, and it's hitting people hard.
So we've gone from these really big, abstract economic forces to a very real example of people in Multan losing millions of rupees. It's kind of scary, honestly, and the article doesn't exactly inspire a lot of hope, does it? Like, are there any solutions?
It's definitely not a quick fix situation, even if everything goes perfectly. They're saying a full recovery might not happen until 2030, maybe even later, like 2035.
Wow, okay, so we're talking over a decade of potential hardship here. If we're trying to wrap our heads around all of this, what are the big takeaways for someone listening, especially if they're worried about these long-term impacts?
I think the biggest thing to remember is this isn't just about real estate, you know? It's like this crisis is showing how vulnerable Pakistan's economy really is at a deeper level. And to fix it, the article says there needs to be a total system overhaul, not just quick fixes here and there.
Okay, but what does that look like? I mean, how do you even begin to fix something so deeply rooted?
They point to a few areas that need a serious revamp. For starters, more transparency in the government, especially when it comes to land deals and development projects. The article's arguing that all this secrecy just creates distrust and makes people hesitant to invest.
Right, like going back to that gap between the informal and the formal systems. Got to build confidence for people to participate in both.
Exactly. And that leads into their next point, which is figuring out how to move money from that informal property market into the formal one. Maybe by coming up with new financial tools or incentives for people to use banks more.
It's tricky though, right? Because you don't want to alienate the people who rely on that informal system either. It's got to be a balance.
You're right, it's a huge challenge, but the article argues that Pakistan can't really move forward unless it bridges that divide. They need both systems working if they want a strong real estate sector, which obviously affects the entire economy.
So even though things seem really bleak right now, it sounds like the article's saying that maybe, just maybe, This crisis could force some necessary changes and lead to a better system in the long run.
That's one way to look at it. Like sometimes things have to break before they can be rebuilt stronger. The article definitely focuses on the challenges, but there's this underlying message that this could be an opportunity for real innovation and positive change.
It's a lot to think about, that's for sure.
It really is. And that's what makes these deep dives so interesting, right? It's not just looking at numbers, it's about these big, complex questions. How economies work, the role of government, the impact of investment decisions on people's lives.
It's a good reminder that even when things seem really uncertain, we can still think critically, come up with creative solutions, and maybe even find reasons to be optimistic about the future.
Absolutely. Sometimes facing those tough questions head on is the only way to find a path forward.
Well, this has been a fascinating, if slightly terrifying, look at Pakistan's real estate situation. Thank you for breaking it all down for us. And for our listeners, we'll link to the article and some other resources in our show notes. Until next time, keep those questions coming. And remember, sometimes the most interesting discoveries come from exploring even the most challenging topics.